Let's get into it. So, who is going to be the next ruling party of England?
Drum roll, please.
I am delighted, as always, to be joined by Steve Swift, who gives us the scope of things happening in the UK, as many things have been happening in the UK, many parts of Europe, certainly here in Canada. The world is in a tizzy, as it were, and England is experiencing that in its own very special way right now at the top parliamentary levels. Less than 2 years after winning a landslide election, Keir Starmer is taking his leave. Steve, thanks for joining us. How have you been?
I've been top hole, thank you. And all of that pip. And
thank you for legitimizing.
I'm all right. It's an extraordinary situation, and we're in a kind of, well, nothing's happening at the moment, so we're in a bit of a honeymoon period. But it's kind of, people are thinking, just look what we could have. Just look at the delights we could have. But it's a bit strange. It is our sixth Prime Minister in, is it 10 years?
I believe it's less than that. I think it's closer to 9. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Correct us
Yeah.
But yeah, you've certainly had a high turnover there. You have more turnover in your parliament than we do at Tim Hortons here on a staffing front on average. But put that aside, let's try to examine it for a minute. I mean, Starmer came in like guns a-blazing, huge support, the nation expecting so many things. And like I say, less than 2 years later, what did this? Was this personality? Was this actual policy? How did we end up here, Steve?
Well, I think the people of Britain forgot what they voted for, which was, let's just get the Tories and Rishi Sunak out. You know, they wanted somebody who was a manager. So, you know, they wanted a 1945 Clement Attlee manager. He's nothing like that. But they wanted somebody who could steady the ship. They didn't want that kind of, well, the Tories have had so many different prime ministers. We need somebody who can just take it easy. He got a massive majority in the House. He always looked to me, I think I mentioned this to you before, that like he was faintly apologetic and that he was worried that something was going to happen.
Right.
And I think it's certainly on my social media feeds, I generally talk to people who wouldn't be fans of the Labour Party and wouldn't be fans of Keir Starmer. And the general feeling is that he doesn't do anything. He hasn't done anything. He's done an enormous amount, and the party has done an enormous amount. I mean, the list is huge, but they've just not got the word out. And the general dissatisfaction of can't feel that in my pocket, can't, you know, and events as well, you know, wars and that kind of thing. But he didn't sell it well enough. And he's not the kind of big character that we needed.
I do think part of this is personality. I do think there's a certain amount of strategy that could have been put into place to find somebody that maybe the right personality up against Starmer at that time might have also had a landslide, depending. I think you're right. The nation wanted a change. They were tired of the merry-go-round, and they wanted something just to change that might stop that pattern. I think we see that in many parts of the world. One of the things that comes to mind is that if he had sort of interacted a little better from a PR perspective, posting what the Labour Party had done, where they had gotten to, and what kind of achievements were coming about. But that was not enough, as you say, up against an economy that is suffering so hard right now, social media that is easily, you can fertilize so much idiotic and inaccurate social media with people just being broke. You know, so I think that was part of the dilemma there.
Yeah, and I think that I don't know who was in his team to give us the good news, because we never got it. So it was always reactive. So if someone said, "Well, you're doing this," they would say, no, but we've put this in place. And then people would say, oh, have you? Oh,
Yeah, I
okay.
didn't know that. Okay, that changes the perspective a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, but he didn't do
I
it
think
enough.
that was desperately needed by this party, I think, from day one, that they had a strong press personality. Because as you point out, Starmer himself is a little bit lacking in charisma, I think.
Yeah, I mean, he's a lawyer. He's a human. He's a lawyer. So, or a solicitor, and I think that kind of will steady the ship feel. And very early on, and we had this with Tony Blair's government actually, only in a different way. He
Mm.
came in, had a huge majority, and then said, "Well." It did the usual thing of, well, we've been left no money by the Tories, so there's very little we can do. That was
Right.
early on, and what the country is desperately in need of, or was desperately in need of, was somebody to say, "Come on, things are going to be okay," and we might be getting that now.
Maybe. Now, here's the thing: you do have financial stress. Britain is under extreme financial stress in many ways, much like we are here in Canada. You're facing what is outrageous inflation. Unemployment is at new highs. Yes, there are new trade deals being created around the world that are unsure. Really, whoever takes over does have a challenge. I don't know, and I think once again, the same deal here in Canada. Any party to take over the debt of the previous party post COVID, post economic slashing globally, realignment after what's happening with Trump. Anybody who comes into power is faced with some real challenges. How do you think whoever comes into power now is going to be faced with the Brits?
It, they've got very, very little wiggle room, as you say. You quite rightly encapsulated it very well. They've got such little wiggle room, and people always say, well, you can pull the levers of power, but if you pull one and nothing happens, what do you do? Or if you pull one and it stops, what do you do? And he's got whoever comes in, and I think it will be a he. We'll talk about this in a minute, I'm sure. You've got very little room. So what you need is someone with a personality to make us feel good. So even if we feel that I can't go and afford another holiday, or I couldn't afford to remodel my house, or I can't even afford some of the basics. But when I see that bloke on TV, I feel better.
What are the issues that you think before we get? And I think that we're not going to be able to make a bet on who comes to power. I think, Steve, unfortunately. But what do you think the major challenges? What's on the minds of Brits right now? What's the top focused issues? I'll give you some examples. Here in Canada, the economy is one, housing is one. Another one is crime and safety. Where do you sit?
Um, Most of the items you just mentioned, yes, are live issues for us, but linked to migration and reform being a party that's coming up from behind, not doing as well as they thought they might. But we'll talk more about that maybe later on. But the economy, housing, jobs linked, seen through the prism of the kind of immigration situation, migration situation, and with a really kind of polarized reform on one side, Greens on the other, acceptable right wing, acceptable left wing, and Labour and the Tories in the middle, with a two-party system. Okay, there's Lib Dems, but with a two-party system that isn't really working at the moment. So as far as the economy goes, we have a GDP that's not performing. It's performing badly, but it's not
Yeah.
performing as badly as some other countries we could describe or we could compare to. But things like NEETs, young people not in education, training, or employment, that's huge. We're getting reports from actually ex Blairite cabinet ministers saying education is not good, NEETs are not good, and there's a feeling of a police being underfunded for many years. So there's a feeling of unsafety,
I
certainly
think that up
in
against
cities.
the migration issues in Britain, almost immediately you saw SWAT armed police in streets over protest. You saw outrage from the police and not having the right resources to manage such an increase in population. These things are tied. I think that you're right. The migration, and it's very difficult because you can quickly be labeled a racist to say that migration is an issue, but it's not just an issue for the original residents of that country. When you set up immigration en masse like this, and we've experienced it in Canada, you don't have the right resources for the people that you've invited to be here. And you leave them in a lurch once they arrive. And it costs everything that they can to get there. They make every move they can in their life financially to make that change. There is no turning back for many of these people. And what they've arrived to is a difficult scenario.
Yes, and it's a conversation that should be had, and it's a conversation that's not being had. So certainly reform, and parties that would seem to be further right than reform, like Restore, are having that conversation and are using that area, or rather not using but claiming that area extremely well. Certainly Labour doesn't really want to talk about it, is the perception. And we haven't had any kind of, let's sit down and talk about this then. I don't know whether
Well,
that
it's
will be
tough,
different
Steve,
in the
because
future.
it's very difficult. Two bearded white guys sitting talking about migration in either of our countries, it stirs up ire that stops conversation that could be solutions for both sides, the migrating and the receiving country. Until you have those conversations, how are we going to find the right kind of work? How are we going to find the right kind of housing and lifestyle that suits everybody, accommodating? And I think that that's a difficult thing right now in Britain.
Yeah, I mean, I think that getting that conversation out in the open and sitting down, and I think I mentioned before to you, I remember the 70s because I'm pretty old, and I remember actually politicians at peak time on primetime TV sitting down and having a debate about the situations of the day, one of which was the common market, the EU of its
Mhm.
time, and should we go in and all of that. And there was a free vote from the ruling Labour Party at the time, and it was good TV, and people talked about it. We don't have that now because policies made on the hoof on social media, and also everyone's their own citizen journalist. So if I say something and 100 people crowd in and say, agree with you, Steve, then that becomes the situation. So,
Right.
that kind of echo chamber thing, or a feedback loop really
Yeah,
is,
that echo
uh,
chamber is so dangerous. You don't get anywhere.
yeah. And I think that's one of the reasons why um, the citizen journalism is one of the reasons why the two main parties don't gain respect from very many people, because they are the voice of authority. But what is the voice of authority? I can now say anything I want to people on social media because I'm behind an avatar, and they may reply to me, and then we may have a ding dong on social media, and I feel excited by that because I've reached that, but it sort of brings those people who are the voice of authority down. And we voted for them to be the voice of authority. Whether we like it or not, we voted for them to do that, to make those choices. And if you're having a ding dong on social media with me, then you're not the voice of authority anymore. You're just having a squabble.
Yeah, it's very interesting how I love the notion that you recognize in our youth. We watched our politicians having real debate on the news or otherwise on a scheduled time slot, and they slugged it out pretty well. You would hear both polarized sides. You would hear the mediated side of it by the press of the day that were there at the table. You're right. That's vanished into social media garbage, in my opinion, in a lot of ways, where conversation only creates, as you point, and I will use this the rest of my life, a ding dong between voices rather than real solution.
Yes, and the good side of the social media thing is that it could be seen that, well, you can't be at this table So in the 70s when I grew up, politicians were at the table and there might be an audience member who might ask a question. We have a show at the moment called Question Time, in which
Hmm.
there's a panel of experts, some politicians, some business people, some social media people perhaps, and the audience ask questions. And I've asked one, I've been on it. So you get picked and they go and see you and they talk to you and all of that. But it's where you can just ask your question. You can't be with us. And in some ways, I appreciate that people want to talk. They want to be able to get somebody in a corridor afterwards and say, "Can we have a chat about what you said? Because I'm on
Right.
your level." And there is a feeling that we're up here in the lofty heights of politics, and you're just asking a question, and you can go back to your job on Monday. So I appreciate that
Right.
social media
Yeah.
is a great leveler in that respect. But what it
Yeah,
does
I
do
think
is
it does come in equal measure with, sorry,
go on.
it comes in equal measure with that echo chamber danger.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it does. I mean, it identifies. I mean, it strengthens your view because I would try and talk to people who are not of my political stripe and say, "But why do you say that?" Or you've quoted a poll here. Where's it from? And sometimes people will come back to me and tell me where I can go, and sometimes people will say, "Oh, okay, well, let's just have a chat about that." But generally, you get, or if you make a comment about something, then people will pile on you because they're all mates. And that's understandable. But social
Yeah.
media just strengthens your view, no matter what it is, no matter how far out there it could be. That's really dangerous.
Yeah, my algorithm shows me some pretty far out there stuff, and I think to myself, "Am I believing this? Is this why my algorithm?" Yeah, you have to be careful. You know, it's interesting. Just as an aside, a couple of months ago, I had a conversation with a notable liberal politician in Canada, and we were talking about Mark Carney and the successes of Mark Carney in their opinion, and so I'm actually quite impressed with some of the things that I see the prime minister do, and other things I question. But we got talking about how the previous government created an anti woke movement in Canada, and that was me just being echo chamberish with this person. But she said to me, "What do you mean by woke? What is woke? You have to define that for me, Mike, because I don't really think everything we do is woke. And I don't really like that phrase because it's almost a label that discredits you." And I'll be honest with you, Steve, by the end of the conversation with that liberal individual, I felt a little embarrassed because I felt that I had echo chambered a little bit myself. And when it came to conversation, what she said to me was really beautiful. She said, "Well, I understand where you're coming from. Do you understand where I'm coming from?" What an interesting position to be in. So rarely.
Y- Yes, and we don't get that, and we have spoken before about if this was in the pub, you would have that conversation, or in a bar, or
Right.
on a walk, you would have that conversation and with your mates. And if you said something that was out there, they'd say, "Come on, mate, defend your position." But you're right. There are certain shorthand semiotic phrases. The ones I come across, I mean, woke is one of them. There are two more: socialist and working
Hmm.
class.
Right.
And so I say, what is working class then? Am I working class? Am I, I was born to working parents, but they earned a lot of money, but they were working and they worked shifts.
Right.
Is a person who works in a steel company who earns £80,000 a year? Is that person still working class? Is it about cultural? Is it about aspirational? But these things are used as a basis, and I always try to say, well, let's unpick it. What does it mean? But that shorthand isn't helpful because it becomes a slogan and an attack.
Yeah. I'm sorry, Steve. I was guilty of it. I caught myself, but it was pointed out to me. But you're right. It is interesting when we start to do this. It does discredit the conversation. Okay, let's get into it. So, who is going to be the next ruling party of England?
Drum roll, please. It will be the prince across the water. Well, actually, not across the water, across the M25. Andy Burnham. It will be him. Now, he's tried twice before to be Labour leader, failed both times. He has been the mayor of Greater Manchester for some years, incredibly popular, not with me, but incredibly popular in general. So I'm in the minority, I would say. He's become the MP of Ashton in Makerfield, commonly called Makerfield, annoyingly to me because I'm very pedantic. And he won that seat handily. It was a two-way.
Now, was he placed in that municipality? He was strategically placed, correct?
Very much so.
Not the right. Okay.
Yeah, the sitting MP who had a 5,000 majority, he left. He resigned. So for no other, I mean, I didn't see why. I looked for it. I didn't see why. There was not.
I'll tell you why, Steve. We needed a different guy running there. Come on.
we absolutely. But the kind of I want to spend more time with my children. That might have been one of them.
Oh yeah.
You know,
yeah. I've used that excuse before.
Yes, it's not been used for years in this country. But Andy Burnham ran a campaign. Really, it was Labour versus Reform. Reform threw an awful lot of resources at it. They came up short quite badly, actually. So 5,000 majority doubled. So it's almost a 10,000 majority now for Andy Burnham. So very quickly, he became the MP for Makerfield. Virtually the following week, Keir Starmer took the advice of some of his party. I think it was a bit like visiting Margaret Thatcher and saying, "You must go, Margaret, you must go."
Yeah.
So I think it was that. He had vowed to fight on, as she had, and he went. Surprisingly, I thought, you won't go and there'll be some blood on the carpet here. But it seems to be what has been called in the magazine article I read recently, a bloodless coup. He is the prince across the water. He will move in, probably unchallenged. The only other challenger would be Wes Streeting. He resigned as health secretary.
Okay, I was going to say, is this part of the cabinet shuffle that moved around as well? I mean, but is there a great distance between the popularity of the two?
Yes. I mean, I think what did for Burnham, though, just quickly, is that Streeting had gone and people expected him to stand, and he didn't. And I suspect he's spoken to Burnham, in the greasy pole of politics to say, what can I have? But what really did, I think, for Starmer was John Healey, who's an excellent politician, who I've met a few times and always been impressed. He was our defence secretary. He resigned on a point of principle because he said that the new defence deal, monetary deal, wouldn't be enough. I think that's what finally did for Starmer. It's always the things you don't expect, isn't it? So I think it's that did for him. Burnham should walk in. He should walk in within the next 2 weeks, I think it is.
Is this the Labour leader that people expected to have? Maybe is this really? And okay, so now he falls into power there, which is fantastic, and for the Labour Party. Do they maintain this now with this leader?
I think there's a really good chance of this. There's a phrase, isn't there? He speaks human. And what he does do, he is kind of, hey, how you doing, guys? Yeah, okay. He's not like that. He's not like a manager, but he's got that sort of feeling that he's human. He's a nice guy. He's calculating, and we know that, but that's kind of done in an ironic way. Mm-hmm. I've still got my season ticket for Everton Football Club. I go running, even though I'm a bit out of shape. You can see me doing that. And he's very good at the vision thing, to use another phrase that's often used. So he's very good at that kind of, we as a nation deserve better. We as a nation are brilliant. Do you know what he is? He's the flip side, or they're very similar, of Boris Johnson. I think, and I'm peddling this belief and this thought, so I'll do it on this show as well. I think there's a boosterism about both of them. So
Yeah.
Boris Johnson was kind of pip, pip, ho, ho, tally ho, and aren't we marvellous? Come on, turn those frowns upside down. This is marvellous, marvellous. Andy Burnham's a similar way, but just not using those kind of words. So it's, I'm here to help you. I'm here to help you. I've got some great ideas. Let's do this together. We're brilliant. And
Yeah.
people come away thinking, oh, he's all right, isn't he? I feel a bit better. And with those animal spirits in voting, but also in shares and stocks and shares and in Canary Wharf, that really helps. That kind of boosterism really helps. He's really good at that.
I think it's interesting that we're starting to see leaders that are really good boosters, I should say. You might have seen our Prime Minister at Davos. He gave one hell of a speech, made Canadians real proud. He's given it several times since. It seems to be his patent speech. But having said that, it is a time for those kind of leaders, especially up against what we see in the U.S. And people will say to me, oh, you're a Trump hater. I don't like his personality. That's the truth. But many people don't. He doesn't really care much about that. In the face of that, we're starting to see more leaders globally come out that represent the human discussion side of things. Meanwhile, they might be at the highest corporate levels, pulling these levers, as you point out. But what the public really wants is that vision board politician that says, we've got this. The future's bright over here. We've created this strategy. Our strategy has all of these memorandums of understanding, which mean nothing. And we're moving forward. But there is something that affects. It affects the bureaucracy, the people who run the civil service. It changes the attitude on the street among people. It's hard to complain when you've got a positive person at the top. You look negative when you do that.
Yes, absolutely right. Because I take your point entirely, because there's very little else to work with. There's very little economically to work with. It's difficult worldwide.
Yeah.
Difficult in Canada, it's difficult in the States, difficult in the UK. So there's very little to work with. You can't say, look at all these trillions of pounds that I brought in, new money. Can't say that. So you might as well say, look, I'm a nice guy. And Burnham is the kind of bloke who you feel you can go for a pint with, a bit like Nigel Farage. He's the anti-Nigel Farage, obviously, but he does have that kind of, come on, I'm just going to go and we'll have a pint and a chat and we'll have a laugh, and you'll feel a lot better coming away than you did going in.
Well, I'm very excited myself to see what happens. What did you say? 2 weeks now?
I think it's 2 weeks. I think he should go in unchallenged. The first real issue for him is his cabinet. I know there are reports that Angie Rayner is coming back, not in a cabinet position, but that she's working with him to deliver housing. Because he's made some big pledges, and one of the main pledges he's made, Mike, is that he has said, because he's a Manchester bloke, he's Wigan and Lee, he's Liverpool, he's Manchester, he's Greater Manchester Mayor. And he said that there will be a number 10 of the North. And it will be in Manchester, actually, not just Greater Manchester, but in Manchester. So certain parts of it will go to Manchester. Gordon Brown tried to do this and succeeded. He sent parts of the civil service to Leeds. And it really, which is a northern town, and it made that town grow hugely. And it's an idea whose time has come. So number 10 being in the north and all of that would be something a bit special. And people, it's that vision thing, isn't it? He's made big comments about house building and all of that with very little detail. But you just announce it.
Yeah.
People go, that sounds great. And look at his eyelashes, aren't they lovely? And all of that. He's got those big, thick eyelashes, those blue eyes. People go, oh, Andy. So
I think that he could be our leader. Look at him. Know what? In Canada, we did that. We certainly in Ontario, north of us, there's Sudbury, there's Thunder Bay, and in different parts of Canada that are fairly remote or rural. Our government at one point said, "Okay, we're going to set up part of our bureaucracy in these areas and run major offices for." In Sudbury is the CRA, the Canada Revenue Agency, and all of these. Ottawa has a huge amount of government buildings. Hull, Quebec, same thing. And what it does is it does invigorate. It creates this job base where there's equal earning among a lot of people. It creates more community because people are feeling positive. It brings families. It creates families that are actually going to have children. And yeah, it can be a very positive thing. I think that will work out well. I think housing's maybe a bit of a tightrope, though. What do you think, Steve?
Yeah, I mean, he announced tons and tons of housing because it sounds good. We need more housing. Yes, the tightrope you mentioned, the housing building for Labour has fallen off that tightrope over the past few years, couple of years, and to say we're going to make loads of housing, people go, more housing, fantastic. There was nothing behind that, so that was pointed out by commentators. But
Right.
generally, by then he's already said it, and he's wearing a t-shirt underneath a jacket. He seems like the kind of fella that I could get on with, and he's wearing jeans. So
Right.
that's all of that people really seem to like. I mean, I just think I've seen it all before. I was alive during the Blair years,
Right.
at which point he was a cabinet minister in that government, but he was health minister actually. But people seem to think he's the guy we want, and he might make a go of it because by not doing much, but seeming like a really nice bloke, he could manage this and bring Labour's fortunes back up.
I do hope that it makes a big change. I think Keir Starmer was a nice idea. Maybe it seemed like a good idea at the time, but when you do very little, or it appears that you do very little, the net result is this. And I don't know that he actually had the druthers to hang in through this drought of media love, but it does look like you guys have a new charmer on the way.
Yeah,
All
I
right.
mean,
Well,
it'd be interesting.
Steve, I'm disappointed you didn't run, but I do understand you have other concerns in life. I would hope that
I,
if this falls through, you will step up.
I have worked on an Andy Burnham campaign before, and he didn't even mind me calling him Bambi Burnham. He did. He just laughed.
Ah, well, isn't that nice? He is a man of the people, after all.
He's got the eyes and the eyelashes. You seem like it's so lovely.
Oh, so do you, Steve. I mean, there could have been a competition here. Steve Swift, our UK correspondent, and link to what's happening on that side of the pond. I really appreciate this. You'll find us doing this once a month. If there's something you want to know about what's going on in the UK, send it to us. Comment on what we've talked about here today, and we'll pick it up in the next conversation. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you very much. Great to see you all. And I love doing this.
Pip, pip, cheerio.